Jessamine Vale had no idea that the man she was about to grab by the arm could crush every bone in her hand without blinking. She didn't know his name. She didn't know what he was. All she knew was that the man following her through the Silverfall night market had gotten closer in the last 3 minutes, and she was running out of crowd to disappear into. The stranger stood at the edge of a lantern stall, half bathed in amber light, half swallowed by shadow. Tall, broad, still in a way that didn't belong to someone browsing festival trinkets. His jaw was sharp enough to cut, dark hair pushed back from a face that looked carved from something older than stone. He wore black from collar to boot. No house sigil, no pack markings, nothing to identify him as anything other than dangerously, impossibly out of place. She didn't think. She moved. Her fingers closed around his forearm, and the muscle beneath the fabric was like iron wrapped in silk. She felt him go rigid, felt the shift of his entire body orienting toward her with a predator's precision, as though every nerve ending had just zeroed in on the place where her skin met his sleeve. "There you are," she said brightly, loud enough for the man 10 paces behind her to hear. She pressed herself against the stranger's side and smiled up at him with every ounce of false warmth she could summon. "I've been looking everywhere for you." The stranger looked down at her. His eyes were the color of molten amber, ringed in dark gold, and they held a kind of intelligence that made her stomach drop. Not confused, not startled, assessing. The way a predator watches something small and fast dart into its territory. 1 heartbeat. 2. "Have you?" he said. Low voice. Not a question. "He's my date," Jessamine announced, turning her head just enough to address the man who had stopped 6 feet away. Greasy smile, hooded eyes. He'd been trailing her since the wine stall, and when she'd told him she wasn't interested, his hand had found her waist with a grip that left bruises blooming beneath her dress. "We're together." The man behind her, a wolf with a northern pack tattoo creeping up his neck, narrowed his eyes. "You said you came alone." "I lied." She tightened her grip on the stranger's arm. "Please play along, please." Something shifted in the air. A pressure. A weight. Like the sky before a storm drops low enough to touch. The stranger moved. Not fast. Deliberately slow, as though giving the world time to understand what was about to happen. He placed his free hand over Jessamine's fingers where they clutched his arm. His palm was warm. Broad. His thumb brushed once across her knuckles, and a strange hum moved through her chest like a plucked string. Then he lifted his gaze to the man behind her, and the temperature dropped. "She's with me," he said. 3 words, spoken quietly. But the northern wolf took a full step backward as though he'd been shoved, his face draining of color so fast Jessamine thought he might faint. "I didn't know," the wolf stammered. "I didn't know she was yours. I swear I didn't." "And yet your hand was on her." The stranger's voice hadn't risen, hadn't sharpened. But Jessamine felt it in her ribs, felt the command beneath the calm, the authority that didn't need volume because it was stitched into every syllable like a birthright. The northern wolf dropped to one knee, right there in the middle of the night market, lanterns swaying above him, the smell of roasted honey and cinnamon drifting past like the world hadn't just tilted. His head bowed, his hands trembled at his sides. "Forgive me, Alpha. Alpha." Jessamine's blood turned to ice. She looked up at the man whose arm she was still holding. He hadn't moved, hadn't shifted, but something behind his eyes had changed. A door sliding open to reveal a room full of sharp edges and cold fire. "What did you just call him?" she whispered. The wolf on the ground didn't answer. He was shaking too hard. A second figure materialized from the crowd. Then a third. Men in dark clothing with silver insignia at their throats, the kind of sigil Jessamine had only ever seen stamped on royal decrees and currency. The Blackthorn crest. The mark of the High Pack. The symbol of the only alpha whose authority extended across every territory from the Ashwood border to the frozen sea. Torin Blackthorn, the Alpha King. and she had her fingers wrapped around his arm like he was a tavern boy she'd hired for the evening. Jessamine released him as though his sleeve had caught fire. Her hand flew to her side, her heart slamming so hard against her ribs she was certain he could hear it. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I didn't know," she managed. "I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. I just needed someone to..." "To what?" He turned to face her fully, and the weight of his attention was like standing beneath a waterfall, overwhelming, consuming. Every instinct in her screamed to drop her gaze, to bare her throat, to submit the way every unmated wolf in the realm was conditioned to do in the presence of the Alpha King. She didn't. She couldn't explain why, but her chin stayed level, her eyes stayed on his, and something flickered across his face that she couldn't read. "To scare him off," she said. "He wouldn't leave me alone. I grabbed the nearest person. I didn't know the nearest person was..." She gestured vaguely at all of him. The ghost of something that might have been amusement moved through his expression. There, then gone. "He was leaving," Torin said, and it took Jessamine a moment to realize he wasn't talking to her. He was talking about the wolf on the ground, past tense, as though the man's departure had already been decided, already written into the fabric of the evening, and the wolf simply hadn't received the message yet. Two of the silver insignia guards stepped forward. The northern wolf was hauled to his feet without ceremony, and Jessamine caught his eyes for one fraction of a second. Terror. Pure, undiluted terror. Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd and the guards and the darkness between the lantern stalls. She stood alone with the Alpha King of the known world in a pool of amber light, the smell of cinnamon curling around them, and realized she had absolutely no idea what to do next. "Thank you," she said, because her mother had raised her with manners even if she hadn't raised her with sense. "And I'm sorry for grabbing you. I know that's probably some kind of offense, touching the Alpha King without permission. I'll accept whatever punishment..." "Torin." She blinked. "What?" "My name. It's Torin." He tilted his head, studying her with those amber eyes, and there was something in his gaze that made her feel like she was being read, not just seen, decoded. "And the only offense I'm aware of is that you let go." The words landed in her chest like a stone dropped into still water, ripples everywhere. She stared at him, searching for mockery, for the cold amusement of a powerful man toying with someone beneath him. She found neither. "You're in trouble," he said. Not a question. "No. You grabbed a stranger's arm in a crowded market because a man you couldn't shake was following you. Your pulse is visible at your throat. There's a bruise forming on your left hip where someone gripped you hard enough to leave a mark through fabric." His eyes dropped briefly, then returned to hers. "You're in trouble, Jessamine." The sound of her name in his mouth made her breath catch. She hadn't told him her name. "How do you know what I'm called?" "Your scent carries your pack signature. Veil Pack. Northern Fringe Territory. Your Alpha submitted a petition to the High Court 3 months ago requesting border protection from raider clans. I denied it." A pause. Something shifted in his jaw. "I'm beginning to think that was a mistake." She felt the anger before she could stop it. Hot and bright and completely inappropriate given the power differential between them, but it surged through her like wildfire, and her voice came out sharp enough to draw blood. "You denied it because our pack is too small to matter. 40 wolves. Half of them children and elders. We don't have warriors, we don't have territory worth fighting over, and we don't have an alpha strong enough to demand attention from the High Pack. So yes, you denied it. And in the 3 months since, we've been raided twice. I lost my home the second time. So I came here, to the night market, to sell what's left of my mother's jewelry so I can buy passage south before the winter kills what the raiders didn't." Silence. The lantern swung overhead. A child laughed somewhere in the distance. The world carried on as though she hadn't just spoken to the Alpha King, the way no one had probably spoken to him in his entire life. Torin Blackthorn looked at her, and for the first time, his expression was completely unguarded. She saw it move through him like weather. Surprise. Recognition. and beneath it, something that looked almost like shame. "Walk with me," he said. "Why?" "Because I owe you an answer. And because the man I just removed from your evening is a northern pack wolf with friends in this market, and if you walk home alone, they'll find you before you reach your door." She wanted to refuse. Every survival instinct she'd honed in 23 years of being small and unmated and overlooked told her that following an alpha anywhere was the fastest way to lose the only thing she had left: herself. But his eyes held hers with a steadiness that didn't demand. It offered. She walked with him. They moved through the thinning crowds, his guards falling into step at a distance that gave the illusion of privacy. The market gave way to cobblestone streets, then to a bridge over the Silverfall River, where the water caught moonlight and shattered it into 1,000 moving pieces. "The petition crossed my desk in a stack of 40 others," Torin said, his voice low enough that the words felt private even in open air. "I read the numbers. 40 wolves. No strategic value. No resources. No alliance potential. I made the rational decision. The rational decision left children without homes. Yes. No defense. No justification. Just the word, dropped like a stone. I've been Alpha King for 7 years. I inherited a fractured realm, 12 packs on the verge of civil war, a treasury bled dry by my father's campaigns. Every decision I make is a calculation. Who benefits? Who suffers? How many survive?" He stopped walking and turned to face her, the moonlight catching the angles of his face and turning them to silver. "It's the first time the calculation has stood in front of me and told me I was wrong." Her chest ached. Not with anger this time, with something worse: understanding. "I'm not here to make you feel guilty," she said quietly. "No. You're here because my failure drove you from your home. That's worse than guilt. That's consequence." They stood on the bridge, the river singing beneath them, and Jessamine felt something she hadn't felt in months: seen. Not as a number on a petition. Not as a body in a crowd. Seen as a person standing in the wreckage of choices that someone else had made. "Come to the keep," he said. "Excuse me?" "The Blackthorn Keep. I have rooms, resources, advisors who can arrange protection for what remains of the Veil Pack. I can't undo what happened, but I can address it. You want me to come to the Royal Keep, tonight, with you. I want you safe. The specifics are negotiable." She laughed. She couldn't help it. The sound came out rough and startled, and something in his expression shifted when he heard it. Softened. Like a lock turning. "You're serious," she said. "I'm rarely anything else." She studied him. This man who ruled every wolf in the known world, who stood on a moonlit bridge offering shelter to a packless woman he'd met 20 minutes ago because she'd grabbed his arm in a panic. His face gave nothing away. But his eyes, those amber eyes, burned with something that had nothing to do with politics or guilt or rational calculation. "One night," she said, "I'll hear what your advisors have to say. Then I decide." "Then you decide," he agreed. The Blackthorn Keep was a fortress carved into the mountain above Silverfall, all dark stone and flickering torchlight and corridors that smelled of pine and old power. Guards nodded as Torin passed. Servants appeared and vanished like ghosts. Jessamine was given a room that was larger than her entire childhood home, with a fire already burning in the hearth and a bed draped in furs so soft she almost wept when she touched them. She didn't sleep. She stood at the window and watched the moon trace its path over the city below, and tried to understand the gravity that had shifted inside her the moment Torin Blackthorn's thumb brushed her knuckles. In the morning, she found him in the Great Hall, and the sight of him in daylight stole her breath in a way she was entirely unprepared for. He stood at the head of a long table surrounded by advisors, maps spread before him, and when she entered, every head turned. Every head except his. His had already been turned toward the door, as though he'd felt her coming. "The Veil Pack border petition has been reopened," he said to the room without looking away from her. I want a protection detail dispatched by week's end, full provisions, healers included. Silence from the advisors, then a flurry of movement, scrolls unfurling, quills scratching. Jessamine stood in the doorway of the Alpha King's war room, wearing yesterday's dress with yesterday's bruise still aching at her hip, and watched a man dismantle a 3-month-old decision because she'd told him he was wrong on a bridge at midnight. You didn't have to do that, she said later when the advisors had cleared and they stood alone in the hall with sunlight slanting through tall windows. No, I chose to. Because of guilt? He looked at her the way he had on the bridge, with that burning steadiness that made her feel like the only solid thing in a liquid world. Because you were right, and because I haven't been able to think clearly since you put your hand on my arm. The admission hung between them like smoke. Jessamine felt her pulse climb, felt warmth spread through her chest and down her arms, felt something deep in her core hum at a frequency she'd never experienced before. That's a dangerous thing to say to a woman with no pack and no power, she murmured. You have more power than you realize. You walked up to the Alpha King and called him a stranger. You told him he was wrong to his face. You laughed at his offer of shelter. He stepped closer, and the space between them shrank to something that felt electric. You're the first person in 7 years who hasn't treated me like a title. You're the first person who treated me like I mattered. The words left her before she could catch them, and the vulnerability in them tore through her like a blade. She saw the impact land on his face, saw his jaw tighten, saw his hands curl at his sides as though physically restraining himself from reaching for her. Jessamine. Her name in his mouth again. But different now. Rougher. Like it cost him something. You matter, he said. You mattered before I knew your name. You'll matter long after this conversation ends. And if you stay, if you let me, I will spend every day making certain you never doubt that again. She didn't stay 1 night. She stayed 3. Then a week. Then the week stretched into something she stopped counting because counting meant acknowledging an end, and she couldn't find one. Torin gave her space and time and access to every resource in his keep. She met with border generals who planned the Vale Pact's defense. She received word that the raider clans had been driven back, that her people were safe, that supplies had arrived before the first frost, and in the quiet hours, she learned him. She learned that he trained alone at dawn because it was the only hour no one needed anything from him. She learned that he read histories by firelight, that he hated the taste of honey wine but drank it at every diplomatic function because his mother had loved it. She learned that his hands, capable of such controlled violence, trembled slightly when he reached for her face the first time. It happened in the library. She'd been reading, he'd been pretending to work. The fire was low, the room was warm, and when she looked up, he was watching her with an expression that broke something open inside her chest. You're staring, she said. I know. At what? At the only thing in this keep worth looking at. She stood. He stood. The distance between them closed like a held breath finally released, and when her hand found his chest, she felt his heart hammering beneath her palm. The Alpha King. Heartbeat racing. Because of her. Torin. Tell me to stop and I will. Don't stop. He kissed her, and the world rewrote itself. His mouth was warm and careful and tasted like the pine tea he'd been drinking, and his hands came up to frame her face with a tenderness that made her eyes sting because no one, not once in her entire life, had held her like she was something precious. The hum in her chest became a roar. A golden thread of warmth unspooled from her core and reached for him, and she felt the moment it connected, felt the snap of something clicking into place, with a certainty that went beyond instinct, beyond choice. He pulled back. His eyes were wide, his breath was ragged. Tell me you felt that, he whispered. I felt it. Do you know what it means? She did. Every wolf knew. The bond, the mate bond. The the one thing in the world that couldn't be forged or faked or broken. "It means I'm in a lot of trouble," she said. He laughed. A real laugh. Full and warm and startled. And it was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. But trouble came before she was ready for it. Lord Varen of the Eastern Pack had been positioning himself for years, allies bought with gold, loyalties corroded with whispered promises. He arrived at the keep 3 weeks after Jessamyn's first night, and his eyes found her at Torrhen's side during the welcome feast with a cold recognition that made her skin crawl. "The Packless girl," Varen said, his smile like oil on water. "How charming that the Alpha King has found a pet project." Torrhen's hand closed over hers beneath the table. Warm, steady. But she felt the tension radiating from him like heat from a forge. "Careful," Torrhen said pleasantly. "You're addressing my mate." The hall went silent. Every fork stopped. Every breath held. Varen's smile didn't waver, but something behind his eyes went flat and calculating. "Your mate? How convenient. An unmated Packless Omega and the Alpha King. Some might call that an imbalance. Some might. Those people would be wrong." Jessamyn watched the exchange like watching a blade being sharpened, every word precise, every pause loaded. She understood, with a clarity that felt like cold water, that Varen wasn't just insulting her. He was testing, probing for weakness, looking for the crack in the Alpha King's armor, and she was the crack. She saw it in the days that followed. Varen's allies arriving in steady streams, whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. A growing tension in the keep that made the air feel thick and charged. "He's going to challenge you," she said to Torrhen one night, standing in the room that had become theirs, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Yes. Because of me." "No." He caught her hand, drew her close. Ooh. His forehead pressed against hers, and she felt his breath warm against her lips. "Because of power. I'm the obstacle. You're the excuse. There's a difference." "If I left..." "Don't finish that sentence." His voice dropped to something raw. "I spent 7 years making decisions with my head. Rational. Calculated. Cold. You are the first thing I've chosen with every part of me. My head, my heart, my instincts, my soul. All of it says you. Leaving would not remove the target from my back. It would only remove the reason I have for standing." She kissed him because words weren't enough. Kissed him with her hands in his hair and his arms wrapped around her like he could hold back the entire world with his body alone. The challenge came at dawn. Varen stood in the stone courtyard with 50 loyal wolves at his back and declared Torrhen unfit to rule. The accusations were political. Favoritism, wasted resources, an unmated king compromised by a bond with a Packless nobody. Jessamyn watched from the steps, her hands clenched at her sides, her heart in her throat. Torrhen walked into the courtyard alone. "You challenge my right to rule," he said, and his voice carried across the stone like thunder across an open plain. "I challenge your judgment," Varen replied. "A king who reshapes policy because a girl grabbed his arm at a market is not a king. He's a fool." "Then come prove it." The fight was fast and brutal and utterly one-sided. Torrhen moved like water and struck like stone, every movement precise and devastating, and within moments Varen was on the ground, with the Alpha King's boot on his chest and the eyes of every wolf in the keep watching. "I reshuffled border protection because 40 wolves, half of them children, were dying," Torrhen said, loud enough for the courtyard to hear. "I did it because a woman brave enough to walk into a night market alone to sell her mother's jewelry so her people could eat told me I'd failed them, and she was right." He looked at Varen with something that wasn't anger. It was disappointment. "You see a Packless nobody. I see the woman who made me a better king. If that makes me a fool, then the realm could use more foolishness." Varen was escorted from the keep before noon, his allies scattered like leaves in wind. By evening, the courtyard was quiet, the torches were lit, and Jessamine found Turin in their room with his head in his hands and his knuckles bruised. She knelt in front of him, took his hands, pressed her lips to each damaged knuckle. "You didn't have to say all that," she whispered. "In front of everyone." "Yes, I did. Because it was true, and because you have spent your entire life being told you don't matter by people too blind to see what you are." He lifted his head. His amber eyes were bright, fierce, full. "You are the bravest person I have ever met. You walked up to a stranger in a market and rewrote my entire world. I will never stop being grateful for that." She climbed into his lap, pressed her face into his neck, felt the bond between them pulse like a second heartbeat, golden and warm and strong enough to hold up the sky. "I love you," she said. First time, quiet as a breath, monumental as a mountain moving. "I know," he said, and his arms tightened around her. "I've known since the bridge, since you looked me in the eye and didn't flinch and told me I'd failed. I loved you before I knew your name, Jessamine. I'll love you long after the world forgets mine." 3 months later, in the great hall of the Blackthorn Keep, with representatives from every pack in the realm gathered as witnesses, the Alpha King formally declared his mate before the court. Jessamine stood beside him in silver and midnight blue, the Veil Pack sigil embroidered at her throat, her people watching from the front row. Whole, safe, home. She looked out at the hall and saw the faces of wolves she'd known her entire life alongside wolves she'd come to know in the weeks since her world had changed. She saw Torin's advisors, who had warmed to her slowly and then all at once. She saw children from the Veil Pack chasing each other between the tables, their laughter ringing off the ancient stone. And she saw Torin, looking at her the way he'd looked at her that first night in the market. Like she was the only solid thing in a liquid world. Like the rational decision and the right decision had finally, impossibly, become the same thing. "He's my mate," she said to the hall, loud and clear and shaking only a little. "And I'm his. Not because fate decided it, because I grabbed a stranger's arm in a night market and he grabbed back." Laughter, cheers, the sound of something beginning. That night, in the quiet of their room, Torin pulled her close and pressed a kiss to her hair. "Do you ever regret it?" he murmured, grabbing my arm. "Never." She tilted her face up to his. "Do you regret not pulling away?" He smiled. That rare, real, full smile that belonged only to her and to firelight and to the space between heartbeats. "I was never going to pull away, Jessamine. You just didn't know that yet." She kissed him, and the golden thread between them hummed, warm and steady and infinite. Outside, the first snow of winter fell over Silverfall, and the world was quiet, and they were home.